Welcome to today's webcast, New and Improved Workflows for Pipe Networks. My name is Brian Lewandowski. I'm the product manager for all of the Civil 3D software here at CTC, and I'm going to be doing the presentation today. So I want to talk a little bit about Civil 3D pipe networks today and what they look like and what's good about them, what's not so great. And so what are some of the pros? They are 3D parts, right? We can't deny that. And what do you get with 3D parts? You get the ability to cut cross sections and profiles, and right, they're model type tool sets. There's a lot of detailed properties in them that allows us to table things, allows us to label things very easily, right? We're not have to typing out that information. This is central to Civil 3D and the point of Civil 3D. But what are some of these disadvantages? Frankly, they're not really design tools, right? Each of those parts are 3D parts. But when it comes to editing all that stuff, you're really having to change slopes one at a time, right? And so it doesn't have a very nice design workflow to it. And so that's where some of the CTC pipe tools come into play. And specifically, I want to talk about some of the enhancements and new features we made to some of our more popular pipe tools. And so that the first one is Pipe Designer. This is the one that saw the biggest enhancements in a release that we just sent out last week. And this is actually one of our most popular tools in the CIM Project Suite. And what Pipe Designer is it's simply a tool that allows you to design by pipe run instead of picking one part at a time and manipulating it, and to edit that in an Excel type interface. Now this has been around for, we've had it for a couple of years. Like I said, it's one of the most popular tools, but we've made some big enhancements to it, much of it from requests of folks like yourselves. And so one of the first ones, you'll notice the interface is a little bit different on the top here if you're used to this tool, is we can now apply rules. And I'll show you this in action in Civil 3D. But you can use rule sets and you can assign those in your parts list, and then those get assigned to the pipes and structures you create in your drawing. They often fall kind of short in terms of allowing you to really design and control your pipe networks. And with the ability to read the values you assign in there and manipulate your table within Pipe Designer, I think you're going to see rules really will factor into how you use pipe networks going forward. There's an interpolate slope function where you can choose any pipe or structure, set that as the starting and the ending part, and it will auto-calculate the slope between those parts. I'll show you that in action as well. Then another major feature is we can now set our pipes to a minimum cover that we specify. This certainly works in gravity systems, but it's almost more geared towards pressure systems like water main or fueling systems. And so a lot of you have been asking for Pipe Designer to work better with your water main designs that you do in pipe networks as opposed to pressure networks. A lot of people have been doing that for a lot of years. And so now Pipe Designer will fully support that. You can control the cover across those entire pipe runs with this function. And we also have full support for null structures, which are commonly the node points or the structures that you have between pipe connections in a when you're using pipe networks for something like water main or fuel lines. The cover that is set, it checks it at the ends of the pipes, but there's also more functionality right within options of the tool. You can have it check at the pipe center and or any kind of interval that you specify. So we've got really smart cover checking involved with your pipes. And so you can dial that in as detailed as you want, or if you're just worried about maintaining that at the ends of pipe, you can uncheck these options. Another common tool in the CIM Project Suite, a popular one, this is actually a free one. It's called Part Swap, and it allows you to swap parts manually. Pretty straightforward, or excuse me, automatically. You can choose all these parts in plan or profile, multiple parts at once, and it'll change it all at once, as opposed to the native functionality where you can only pick one part in plan view and change it one at a time. One of the major requests we had received for this was the ability to swap out multiple parts, but when it switches to a new part family, to be able to retain the size of that part, right? So if I've got a run of 8-inch ductile iron pipe, and then it goes into a 12-inch and an 18-inch and so on, and I need to swap out a whole set of pipes, I don't want to change all those to a different size. Maybe I'm just switching it to PVC, but I still want to keep the same size, right? So maybe you're changing materials or something like that. You do that through a swap part, but you don't want to lose all your part size. So this retain size is a nice functionality. And if there aren't sizes available in that new part family you choose, Part Swapper will prompt you accordingly and let you choose what size it should go to. Another little feature is to be able to select parts by pipe run. So when you're swapping parts, normally you have to window select or manually select those. Now there's a pipe run option where you can choose a starting part, an ending part, and it'll swap out or select all of those and bring those into your selection set in Part Swapper. And finally, I'll mention briefly, we didn't do any major enhancements to this, but it's part of the pipe network workflows with the CTC tools. It's called Parts Tagger. I just want to mention it briefly. Those of you who aren't familiar with it, it allows you to edit part properties en masse across an entire network, across an entire set of structures. So all kinds of things like reference surfaces or descriptions, or reference alignments, the surface adjustment values, all these kinds of things that you would normally have to edit one part at a time, you can do it all at once. And the properties that are available here are typically the ones that you would be perhaps changing from project to project. You know, some of these values you just have in your pipe catalog, and they just kind of stay as is when you bring them into drawings. But others, they change from project to project. So that's Parts Tagger. No new enhancements there, so I'm not going to show that in Civil 3D, but I just wanted to make those who aren't familiar with our pipe tools aware of this one. So let's jump into Civil 3D and look at, firstly, Pipe Designer and a couple different use cases. So starting off with just the fundamentals of Pipe Designer, what is it? And then we'll look at the new features for those who aren't familiar with Pipe Designer. Normally when I'm working with pipe networks, be it in plan or profile, right, I can do some grip editing on the slopes of my pipes. Okay, I can go into pipe properties and change slopes in this tab in here. Okay, and same for structures, right? I can go in here and change different structure properties. But when it comes to how we design gravity systems or even pressure systems, that's not the way we necessarily think about it. It's not one part at a time. So Pipe Designer allows me to pick a whole run of parts at once and manipulate things like slope, elevations, invert drops across structures, all at once. And so it works like this. If I pick Pipe Designer, I'm going to start down here in Profile, because we're worried about a vertical design at this point. I've laid it out horizontally, but now I need to do my vertical design before I go push it to perhaps some analysis. So let's take part of this pipe run. We'll go from this structure all the way to this one right here. Notice it highlights it as I pick, and I hit enter, and it will load those parts in an Excel type interface. Now the first structure is the one that I picked first. That's the first row or the top row in the spreadsheet. Now I could select in the other direction. You can design upstream, downstream, whatever situation you're in, Pipe Designer will handle it. And then from here, it's pretty intuitive to work with. So if I look in the spreadsheet here, perhaps I want to set some slopes across this. I've got some of these at 0.5, some at different values. I can press and drag a negative 0.5, just like that. If I hit apply, you'll see that applied to the parts in profile view. Now I've got some invert drops here. Perhaps that was unintentional as I was changing my design horizontally. Some different elevation and drop values were inadvertently assigned. I can manipulate those easily. If I hit apply, that responds, okay? So it's basically like a cascading spreadsheet. The white values, the white cells you can edit, the gray ones are calculated, okay? And it all starts from a top-down kind of approach. So this first structure right here, the invert is 781, and we make that one editable. So if I wanted to drop this entire pipe run, I could go and set this, say, 779. Now watch as I tab out of this, all of these elevations will update by 2 feet. I hit apply, okay, and that whole pipe run can move up and down as I see fit. Now that's great, but that was the kind of the core functionality of Pipe Designer, and it it also included the option to be designing by crowns or obverts, or be editing elevations. And in this case, for crowns or obverts, I get a factor column that shows up. Okay, so what's my crown or obvert matching factor? And then when I click on edit elevations, notice in the pipe columns what changes here. I'm no longer editing slope, I'm editing elevations, and slope instead is calculated. So oftentimes you may want to switch to that for some kind of nuanced elevation editing, or if you're typing in perhaps some as-built information for an existing pipe network. So working in edit slopes, we'll stick with that, okay? Now let's take a look at some of this new functionality. And most of that shows up right here in the pipe run editing section. We cleaned up this interface a little bit. It's a little simpler to look at. You still have some of the same functionality about part behavior, like what we're displaying for pipes. Right now I've got it set to invert, but I could be displaying crown or obvert, or I could be displaying top of pipe, okay? With the structures, what am I controlling? Okay, that's what the setting is about. Right here, I'm controlling sump, and the invert automatically gets calculated based on sump values, drop values, and pipe slopes. But if I set this to invert, now sumps are calculated such that if I change the invert value, the sump is calculated over here. There's always undo functions in here. These don't undo things in your drawing, but they will undo table edits within Pipe Designer. Let's cancel out of that. Let's hit undo to get back to that original state of our pipe network, like this. And let's load the whole pipe network, or the whole pipe run that we see in Profile View. Let's load that into Pipe Designer. Let's take a look at some of these new functions here. This pipe run editing, apply rules. What is that? Okay, some of you may not be familiar. There are native things called rule sets in Civil 3D, and you can assign them in your parts lists, and then they dictate how your parts come into the drawing when you initially insert them, and they can also be used to kind of edit the parts after the fact. But what many of you have found, and I've found too, is that they don't really behave the way you want. There's an apply rules option here, but it doesn't always work the way you want. And so what we've done is taken the rules that you can assign right here in your properties. So I've got a rule set for 24-inch RCP, and among other things like pipe to pipe end match, length check, I've got minimum slopes in here, okay? So depending on the pipe diameter and the pipe type, you have different slope values that you want to design to. I've got a variety of rule sets in here for different sizes of RCP to help kind of illustrate what I want to do today. And these rule sets, if you've never used them, you can assign them in your parts list. So if I go to the Settings tab and Tool Space, I take a look at my storm sewer parts list, and I go to Pipes, then I go to my RCP. Right over here, you can see these rule sets assigned. Now again, they're kind of clumsy. They help the parts come in kind of a reasonable location, but for the most part, they don't really aid you in design that much. I've seen some people come up with some odd workflows here and there, but what we've done in Pipe Designer is taken these rule sets and applied them in similar but slightly different ways to your parts so that you can take entire pipe runs and set them to minimum slopes, control invert drops automatically, setting them based on your rules. So let's take a look and see what how that looks. We'll grab this pipe run, entire pipe run this time. Notice I've got a variety of sizes, 18-inch, 24-inch, 36 and 48-inch RCP. Okay. And if I apply rules, what it's going to do is it's not going to write to the parts right away, but it's going to update this table based on rules set in there. And the primary one I want to focus on right now is the pipe slope. So we'll uncheck structures for the moment. And in each of those different pipe sizes, I've got default slopes assigned or minimum slopes required, okay? So if I click on apply rules for pipes, notice what's going to happen in this slope column here. We'll get those minimum slopes assigned that's set up in each of those rule sets, okay? Let's move this out of the way a little bit. If I hit apply to this, we'll see all of those minimum slopes set accordingly. Okay, now I unchecked my structures, so a lot of that isn't behaving correctly, right? It set the cover and it set the slope, but it's not accounting for any of the structure rules yet. So let's turn on structures and let's apply rules to both structures and pipes. And notice it changed a variety of things. It set drop values. Check my slopes again. Let's set this back to sump, in fact. Apply rules again, okay. Because I had it set to invert, it wasn't calculating correctly, but I also have a rule in there that's controlling my sump value to set it to 0, okay. So a lot of different controls we can set at once, and how you design depends on how you're going to set up your rules. But know that whatever rules you set in there, we can read those values in the Pipe Designer and then manipulate your table accordingly. So if I hit apply to this, we should see a big change to this pipe run down here. Okay, notice these slopes, 0.52% for the 18-inch RCP, and then down here on the 48-inch, we've got 0.1%. So it's reading that minimum slope. Recommendation for what rule sets to use. Okay, to get started, at least use, if we take it open up one of these rule sets, at least use the cover and slope rule, because you can really quickly and easily set default slopes or ideal slopes in your pipes just by clicking apply rules in there. And then in your structures, if we take a look at those, I've got a set sump depth value of 0 in here. And then we can also control our invert drop or our pipe drop across the structure. I've got mine set to 0.1. Now, how you have this set, now if you're designing by invert matching, okay, you have invert rules, that's what's gonna show up here. But if you have this set to crown, okay, a crown drop is different than an invert drop if the pipe sizes are different, right? So you gotta think about that a little bit when you're applying your rules within Pipe Designer. Let's take a look at another one of the functions in Pipe Designer. And that is the interpolate slope option. So I'm gonna kind of mess up my pipe network again here. Let's grab a pipe run from here all the way down to this 48-inch. And what I'm after here is setting a constant slope across a variety of pipes that have many different slopes at the moment, right? But I want to basically hold the starting elevation and the ending elevation and then have it calculate my slope for me. Right now I've got slopes all over the place, okay? So let's say we're setting a constant slope across this. Now first, we can look at the drops. Should we have these big drops like this? Let's say we want to set those to default. I can just use this press and drag option. But the sump value, say we want this 2-foot sump at the end, but we don't want the invert to change down here, okay? If you right click on any part in the structures categories, you've got lock invert. And what it will do is it'll lock the invert for just that part. So it's like this setting up here, but it's just for that part. And what happens when you do that and you interpolate slope is it'll force a slope interpolation between this value right here and this one right here, okay? If you don't lock the invert, it's going to take the invert value of the end pipe and leave that sump value in place, okay? Let's zero out some of these sumps as well. So I'm going to hit apply. So before I interpolate slope, I'm just going to apply this, okay? And oops, made a change. Didn't mean to do that there. Let's undo that. Let's go back and load that again. So let's lock that invert, 762.6. Okay, notice as I change these invert drops now, the sump value of that last structure, that fluctuates with it. Okay, let's get rid of this sump right here. Okay, now if I click interpolate slope, I think I've got it set right. It'll calculate between 781 and 762.6. So interpolate slope. There's drop downs right here. It defaults to the entire length of the pipe run, but you can choose any parts within that pipe run, you know, to interpolate just between a portion of it. I'll click interpolate slope. Let's apply rules, or apply that to our interpolate again. There we go. Depending on how many changes, I made a lot of changes to the drop value and the sump value. So the initial calculation left the sump value down here. So depending on how you're working with it, you may need to interpolate twice, because it's how we calculate that is kind of a cascading thing. So anyway, I clicked it twice and now I have 0 sumps. I have a slope that will carry me from 781 to 762.6 all the way here. I can hit apply to this. You'll see that update in the drawing, okay? How much time would that take you otherwise, right? That's why pipe networks are so tedious to work with, because you're editing those parts one at a time. Let's move on to another scenario. I had mentioned that Pipe Designer is fully set up to now support water main design, or like pressure-based systems. Some of you might be using the pressure network tools themselves. Many of you haven't moved to them because you know, there's still a number of shortcomings there. So if that's you, you can use Pipe Designer fully now for any of those water design systems. And I'm going to kind of walk through the basic workflow of how you use pipe networks for a water main design. And what's real common is to first get a horizontal layout. So I've got just kind of a sample piece here, an offset from my center line. I've got a polyline, and I'm going to turn this into a feature line. And I'm going to assign elevations from FG. Okay, that's now a feature line. It's sitting at FG, but only at those vertices right there. Now, what's common with water main design is we have cut lengths of, say, 18, 20, or 25 feet. And so what's handy is if before you turn this into your pipe network, you insert elevation points at that cut length. So I'm going to insert elevation points. I'm going to do increment. I'm going to say 25. Okay. Don't worry about this offsetting. This is just a graphics thing that occurs sometimes in Civil 3D, but the feature line is fine. Now I can grab this feature line again. I can assign elevations from surface. I'm going to pull from FG again, and we'll pick this feature line. Okay, and then assign elevations to all of those elevation points. Okay, this is a pretty old school workflow where we create a feature line, we assign it to finished grade, and then we raise or lower it. So I'm going to click raise lower. I'm going to lower it down 7.5 feet. Okay, and then from here we take and we turn that feature line into a pipe network. And then you get all your pipe objects that you can show in profile and everything. And it's kind of cool, but the problem with it is that once you have all those little pipes, those 20-foot or 25-foot pipe lengths, they're really tough to work with when you're trying to control your vertical design. Pipe Designer is going to help immensely with this. So first, let's do a create pipe network from object, and I'll pick this feature line. And we're going to make a pipe network called water. I'm going to use the parts list called water. I'm going to use PVC 8-inch to start with. My structures will be null structures. The surface, the reference surface, will be FG. The alignment, we'll choose that center line alignment. And we'll go ahead and erase that existing entity. And what I'm going to do is use the vertex elevations from that feature line and set my pipe so that that represents the outside top. Okay, I hit OK to this, and now we get a whole run of pipes. These are pipe network objects and then null structures. What I like to do is just have a simple block that represents the null structure, and then I put it on a no plot layer inside the style. Okay, now let's take a look at this. Let's get this whole thing in profile view so we know what we're working with. We'll do a select similar. Then we're going to add all of those parts to this profile view down here. And right off the bat, we see that we, instead of lowering that feature line 7.5 feet, we accidentally raised it. So now I've got pipe 7.5 feet in the air, right? And what do you have to do? Oftentimes, what are you doing in this here? Like deleting your pipe network, going back to your feature line, lowering it, editing it, right? What Pipe Designer is going to allow you to do is to be able to work with this pipe network and design it in ways you would when you're dealing with pressure systems like water main. So let's load Pipe Designer, use Pipe Designer to load this. Pick this starting part, go right to the end here, and it'll highlight everything in between. Quite a few parts this time. So we'll see Pipe Designer load all of these different parts in a table, okay? Zoom and set our pipe run down here. And now you're thinking, well, that set min cover would come in pretty handy right now, right? So minimum cover, if you put in a positive value of 7.5, okay, it's going to put the top of the pipes 7.5 feet below the reference surface. And it's also going to look at what options we have set in here for cover checking. I'm going to turn on pipe center as well as intervals along the pipe. Let's go 5 feet. Checking every 5 feet along that pipe to make sure I meet cover. If I click set min cover, it'll update the table. Look at all these elevations as I click this. They're all going to change. They dropped what was nearly 15 feet. Yeah, I can hit apply to this. And now the entire thing drops below. So pretty handy, right? But now it's not just about always setting it to a minimum cover. Sometimes we want to hold a constant slope. Let's do a few things. Let's make this a little more complicated. Let's put in some different pipe sizes here. Let's grab this here, and here's where part swapper comes into play. I'm not going to show you the new feature quite yet, but let's say we want to change all of that 8-inch RCP or PVC to 18-inch, and then perhaps this portion needs to be 12-inch. Okay. Now if I go back into Pipe Designer, let's load this entire run again. I've probably violated some covers, right? Because now those larger pipes are going to have a different cover. And in fact, with our min cover column turned on, you can see that for the 12-inch pipe, and then of course for the 18-inch pipe, we're violating that cover. Okay. So this functionality right here will read the top of pipe elevations and adjust them accordingly. So let me click Set Min Cover again. Values updated. If I hit Apply on the drawing, you'll see that respond accordingly. Now, depending on what you're doing, you don't always just want a constant cover. Maybe you want to hold a constant grade for a portion of this. For example, let's set a constant grade across this set of 12-inch PVC. And before we do that, let's get some labels on here so we can see a little bit more what we are looking at. Tire network profile. Let's get rid of the structure labels. We don't need those. Then I'll dial down my annotation scale just so we can see what we're looking at. Let's go to 10. Okay. So we've got slopes, pipe size on all of these. Keep it at 5. Okay. And let's load Pipe Designer again. And this time we'll go from here to right here. Actually, no, let's load the entire pipe run. I'm going to mention one other thing here. You probably noticed that the pipes are not lining up center to center. Okay. There's a setting in here when you're doing pressure systems like this. What you want to do is work in the match crowns or obverts mode. Okay. And you want to set your constant or your crown factor to 0.5. So when I click this, what that's going to do is load a factor of 0.5. Okay. And then if I be sure to zero out my drop values, because we don't want any drop for any of this. If I hit apply, what you'll see is these different size pipes line up in center line now. Okay. I can even set my min cover again, hit apply again. Okay. And we're satisfying that min cover everywhere. But what did I say? I want to adjust and set a constant grade from here to here. So what would that look like? Okay, let's go find that transition between the 8 and the 12-inch. Let's reselect that pipe run. So this null structure right here, this one is S41, okay, structure 41. So we're going to hold a constant grade from structure 41 or null structure 41 all the way to this other transition where it goes to 18-inch. So that would be S52. So we'll set this at S52. Okay. Now if I interpolate slope, what you'll see is all those values calculated there. We'll hit OK, and then you'll see a constant grade across that area. Oops, messed up on something. Let's do that again. I'll just pick from here to here this time. Okay, we said we want to go from, let's set our cover again, make sure we have that appropriately. Make sure we have 0 drops, right? So as you can imagine, rules can play into this as well. Use some rules to control some how the pipe ends match and so forth. Okay, and now let's set that constant grade from S41. See if I can do this right. S52. Interpolate slope. Let's see that 0.04% grade set. I'm going to hit apply to this. And then we get a constant grade right there, right? Okay. So it's not always just follow surface, right? You may want to be holding constant grade for portions of this. There's other things that might play into it as well. Let's look at one other thing where we've got pipe crossings that might interfere with our water main. How does Pipe Designer handle that? Okay, we've got that crossing storm line in there. Let's go to our styles and specify an override so we get just the pipe crossing ellipse. Okay. And you can see it's violating, right? We've got that storm, the water main is in the way. We can't move the storm, but so the water main needs to go around it. We can't go above it, we need to go below, so we maintain that minimum cover. And normally you'd be kind of grabbing these pipes and manipulating them, but it gets really kind of tricky to work with because, you know, do you need to put in a 45-degree bend? Can you just angle the joints a little bit so long as you don't violate your deflection? It depends on how much you need to slope this stuff and what you're doing. So let's grab Pipe Designer. And we're going to go from here. So 3 pipes to the left of the crossing and then 3 to the right. And you may have noticed that I have a vertical deflection column turned on. This is something we added to Pipe Designer just a couple months ago, a previous release, but this is in there now as well. Another feature we released back then was the ability to control precision, specifically in Pipe Designer. You can override that right here, or if you set it to use drawing precision, it'll use the basic AutoCAD setting units, and that'll be reflected in Pipe Designer. So I've got vertical deflection. I'm not gonna put bends in here. I'm gonna attempt to just slope this water main down and then back up to avoid that storm line. But my deflection is, of course, a concern in dealing with that. So let's grab these 2 pipes, this one here, and this one here. We'll slope them down, and then this 2 and these 2 will slope them back up by a similar amount. So it can be pretty easy to just type in, let's say, -5, and then we'll go back up at 5%, right? Let's hit apply to this, and you'll see a water main respond. But depending on what your max deflection is, you know, maybe that won't work. So we can perhaps try -4. Now that deflection, say our max was 5 degrees. Now we're under that. You can hit apply. Okay, I'm clearing that storm, and everything is hunky-dory. Okay. Now you could put much steeper slopes in here, and you could actually get a deflection angle of, say, 22.5 degrees if you wanted to put a fitting in there. Okay, if that's how you wanted to do it. In this case, I didn't need to go that much deeper, so I just sloped it in that way. But you guys are the design experts. You know exactly what you would do there. A lot of different options, though, right in Pipe Designer. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to show you, we talked about a new feature in Parts Swapper, a really handy tool that allows me to swap out entire sets of pipes and or structures. You've seen some of that already, but what if I want to do it across an entire network because I want to change the pipe type? In this case, I want to go from PVC, now spec'd out, to use HDPE. Okay, my whole run is designed, but I simply need to change the pipe type. It's not quite done. I can see I accidentally put a drop down here. We'll grab that whole pipe run again. This gets pretty easy to work with. You can load that entire pipe run. Now it's a lot of parts, so it takes a second to load in here, but because they're pipe networks, right, it's going to let you have these drops. So you need to control them. Like I said, use rules. That can be real handy, or just come in here. You can zero it out. If I hit apply, that'll now respond in kind. Okay. If that is deeper than I needed it, I could come in here and just say force these at -1%. That end of the line there, hit apply. Okay, you get the idea, right? We can easily manipulate slopes across multiple pipes like this, or we can use any of these pipe run editing tools for it to calculate slopes for us. All right, let's look at that part swapper function. This entire run needs to switch from PVC to HDPE. What would you normally be doing? Okay, you might kind of do a band-aid fix where you go into the pipe properties and you change the description here. Or you just painfully pick each part and you swap it out one by one, go from PVC to HDPE and so on, okay? What we're after with Part Swapper, and I want to mention again, this is one of the free tools. So if you don't own CIM Project Suite, these light green buttons, these are all free tools. They're free indefinitely. The other ones are free with a trial, so you can try them out, and then they become part of a paid license afterwards. All right, let's run Part Swapper. We'll pick this entire part run. And I do want to mention the new feature right here. It shows up in the command line. It used to be that you would just pick parts. Now you could window select around them, but you can now choose pipe run down here. And in this way, I can choose a starting and an ending part, and it'll highlight every structure in between, much like Pipe Designer, but we now have that functionality for Part Swapper. And with that, you can see 19 structures come in, 18 pipes, okay? And here's the new feature. It's not much of a change to the UI, but there's a lot of functionality going on behind it. Normally, you would come in here and you would choose which new part size, a specific part you wanted. But if you click on retain size, you can no longer choose the parts themselves. You can only choose the part family. And that's what we're after, right? These are all PVC right now. We want to switch them all to HDPE. Okay, so I've got retain size, got HDPE selected. I'll hit OK. Because I've got a label assigned, that label will respond, and every part will switch out for me automatically. Nothing changed in my design. All my slopes and elevations are the same, right? And I can move on. Okay. So that is some of the stuff I wanted to show you guys today. Thanks for hanging out. I'll get to the questions in just a moment. I wanted to do go through a couple announcements, and then we'll get to any questions there are. So feel free to type those in, but I wanted to mention a couple things. The CIM Project Suite 21.0.3 was released last week. That has these new features I was just showing you for Pipe Designer and Part Swapper. It also has some mostly bug updates for AutoGrader and Label Genie. Those were big, robust tools we just released over a month ago. The CIM Manager Suite update, .1, was released. It was a variety of miscellaneous updates and enhancements. That was released last week as well. So you can always go and grab those, install those to get the latest features. You can do that if you're a current owner go to the About menu in any app, and download it, run the installer, it'll upgrade all your stuff. Or if you want to purchase any of these yourself, you can contact ATG or SolidCAD. Or if you just want to try out, you just want to get a trial, go to our product page, ctcsoftware.com, go to the CIM Project Suite. You can download a trial right here. That will be a full installation, okay? That's how you get access to the free tools, and definitely the other ones will be a trial for 2 weeks, and then you can purchase a license for those if you wish. So some things that are coming soon, some other new apps we're really excited about, a really robust earthwork processing app, allowing you to calculate earthwork subgrade surfaces at multiple different depths. We also have a pipe networks tool that's going to allow you to take networks, push them out to Excel. You have all kinds of custom formatting options on that export. You can run analyses right in Excel, or if you bring that into other third-party analysis apps, you can do that as well, or you can use it for reporting or anything. So basically the pipe network export option to rule them all. I know there's a variety of things out there. They all have a lot of limitations to them. This one is going to hopefully solve all of it for you guys. And we've also got big new features coming out for AutoGrader and Label Genie soon. So with that, oh, one other one, Corridor Mapper, that's going through a big overhaul. This is about automated corridor target mapping, a huge time saver for those of you building complex corridors. You spend a lot of time doing targeting and setting that stuff. Corridor Mapper has been a popular tool. We're adding a whole bunch of new features to that one as well. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions you have. I saw one come in. It was about how do you get the free tools. I think I mentioned that. Go to our website, ctcsoftware.com. Go to the CIM Project Suite page. Download the trial there. Thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and we'll see you soon.